We are now a few weeks into the 2025 NFL season, and for some teams, including potentially my Cincinnati Bengals, it's time to already kind of turn attention to the NFL draft. There's just a lot more hope and upside when you're kind of looking at the next guys that could come in and help your team. So today we're going to be going over a full mock draft of the first round, talking about some players, some potential fits as well. I did put the draft order as the reverse Super Bowl odds, so don't yell at me if you don't agree with the draft order. It's just what FanDuel and the other betting sites have as kind of their reverse Super Bowl odds right now. So that leaves the New York Jets here with the number one overall pick. And I think if they are in this position, it's got to be a quarterback. There's some really interesting options now at this kind of point in the draft. Guys like Garrett Nussmeier, Lenora Sellers, they've been all right. I think there's been some up and down moments. I think Sellers in particular had some really nice plays against Missouri last week. Nussmeier hasn't done a lot wrong, but he's still just not looking like this dominant, top three overall pick. Fernando Mendoza, John Mateer, guys who have risen up a lot this year, as well as Dante Moore. We'll kind of see as the season progresses how they play against tougher competition. I think Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik definitely haven't impressed as much as originally thought they potentially could. So the number one pick is very open, but I think the flashes of Lenora Sellers with his incredible athleticism, his arm talent, yes, he does need to get better at, reading out defenses, throwing with anticipation and timing, but the physical traits are absolutely all there. And if he continues to put things together like he did against Missouri, I could absolutely see the case for no clear-cut number one overall pick in this draft. I could see him ultimately ending up being the number one pick for the QB-needy Jets here. At number two, though, for the New Orleans Saints, I also think they'd go in the quarterback direction. Obviously, you took Tyler Shuck last year, but I don't think that prevents you from taking a guy early here. I'm going to go with Garrett Nussmeier, obviously the local connection. His dad is the offensive coordinator for the Saints staff. I think that would be really interesting to see. I think as we get into SEC play, Nussmeier is going to show his experience, his ability to throw with anticipation and timing. I think he is just the most pro-ready quarterback in this class. He just comes with good accuracy, good anticipation. If he can cut down on the stupid turnovers that he has cleaned up a little bit, but they're still prevalent in his game, I think he can be worth a top three selection. He may not be your traditional second overall pick as far as the traits. He's not this super big guy with super giant arm, but he has a lot of talents, a lot of things that the NFL is going to really like in a quarterback prospect. And number three, a very easy selection here, Rueben Bain Jr. out of Miami, Florida. When you look at his underlying PFF stats, they are ridiculous this year. A 95.8 overall grade, 3 sacks, 15 hurries. Look at his pass rushing grades across the board. He has been absolutely ferocious. He's not got a traditional build. He's a little bit of a stockier player, kind of has a fire hydrant type build to him. So, would be curious if that affects kind of where he ends up in the draft. But if we're just basing it off of pure production and kind of what he's shown this season, getting after the passer, being a really good run defender, Rueben Bain should be the first non-quarterback off the board since he is in a premium position as well. And number four for the Giants, you could certainly look to the defensive line. You could look at Caleb Downs, who may have an argument of being the best player in this class regardless of position. But I'm going to go with Spencer Fano, the tackle from Utah. He's had a little bit of an up and down season, didn't look quite as good against the really good edge rushers from Texas Tech this past week. But I think overall, he has great athleticism. He has very good technique. He's got a lot of the things that you'd look for in an offensive tackle prospect that you're taking high. And for this Giants team, you're looking to build around Jackson Dart. You're looking to, help him get the ball to Malik Neighbors. And this offensive line has not been good for the Giants. And I think Spencer Fano is the top tackle in this draft right now and have the Giants taking him at number 4 there. Then we go with the Titans. I think you could go in a lot of different directions. Look to help out Cam Ward, obviously. But with Spencer Fano off the board, offensive line, I'm not sure there's a guy here that I love at pick number 5. But I do think that ultimately you may just end up taking the best player available. And I get he's a safety, but he is a defensive playmaker. Caleb Downs is a guy who just flies around the field. He's really good coming up in the box, tackling. He's a great coverage player. Has been the best player on defenses at Alabama and Ohio State. Has been exceptional since a true freshman. So I really think Downs just has so much natural talent. I think if we're looking at pure talent across the entire class, regardless of position, he has a very strong argument for being the best player in the class. So getting that player at number 5, don't think you can complain too much about that. Then at number 6, a guy who I think has shot up draft boards, and rightfully so. I love this player, Mansour Delane. Going to take him for the Dolphins at number 6. Jermon McCoy certainly has an argument, but coming off the injury, he hasn't played at all this year, probably not going to play for a little while. I think Delane has just looked so good for this LSU defense. In press man coverage, he's certainly shown an ability to be physical, break up passes at the catch point. He's been really effective in the games he's played so far. I think he's going to continue to climb and will ultimately end up being a top 10 pick if he continues on this trajectory. And for the Dolphins, they have pretty much no corners to speak of, so getting a guy in that spot just makes way too much sense. Next, for the Browns, we're going to go to the QB position. Obviously you have the 2 young guys in Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, but I don't think that they truly believe in those guys, and I'm going to go with Fernando Mendoza here, who has been balling through 5 touchdowns last week against Illinois, 5 the week before, I believe, as well against Indiana State. So he's putting up big-time numbers. He's really good within the structure of the offense. I think there's a lot to like in Mendoza's game. He's 6'5", 225 pounds, has done a good job cutting down some of the really stupid turnovers and bad decisions he had at Cal. So we'll continue to see as he has tougher games coming up, but they completely dismantled Illinois last week, and I think Mendoza is certainly pushing himself into the conversation for being a potential top 10 pick. Next up, the Raiders at number 8. I don't think they'd mind at all upgrading the offensive line. I think that's a problem area for them, but again, I didn't love the value at this point. I think that getting somebody like Peter Woods would be really, really good for them in the middle of this defense. Obviously, you don't have Christian Wilkins anymore. The Clemson team as a whole has obviously had a horrible season. I think Peter Woods has still done a pretty good job in the middle of that defense. Maybe not quite as dominant as he was, last year or even the year before as a true freshman, but overall, I still think the talent is absolutely in there, and he is still destined to be a potential top 10 pick. So Woods there at number 8 for the Raiders. Next, we have the Cincinnati Bengals at number 9. Obviously, picking this high because of the injury to Joe Burrow that's likely going to keep him out all, or if not all, most of the season this year. So if it comes to the Bengals, obviously the defense was a problem last season. You could look at a guy like TJ Parker or a cornerback like Jermon McCoy, but ultimately to me, it's kind of malpractice to not take an offensive lineman to help protect Joe Burrow. Unfortunately, he has proven to be a little bit injury prone or at the very least unlucky. And I think you have to dedicate resources to protecting him because this team is not anything without their star quarterback, and you have to protect him. I'm going to go with Francis Mauigoa here, the tackle from Miami. He plays right tackle, which they have Amarius Mims who plays there and has certainly shown some good promise, but I think Mauigoa would slide in at guard really nicely at that right guard position. Orlando Brown also has not looked great at left tackle this year. He may be slowing down a little bit. At 6'6", 315 pounds, Mauigoa, I do think may be a little bit better suited for guard just because of some of the length things that go on with his game where I think he can lose the length battle a little bit. But ultimately, you can try him at left tackle. If that doesn't work, I think he'll be an excellent guard. I think for the Bengals, you just have to invest resources into protecting Joe Burrow and keeping him upright because without him out there, this Bengals team really is very directionless. At number 10 for the New England Patriots, you want to surround Drake May with as many options as possible. I think you go with Jordan Tyson here out of Arizona State. He's had a really nice season. He's a really good separator, has good hands. He can win in just a lot of different ways. And so continuing to create a weapons room that has some dynamism and an ability to separate for Drake May, who has really shown some great things. I think you just need to get more explosive on offense, more consistent in that passing game, and getting another wideout, potentially the best in the draft for the Patriots, makes a lot of sense for them. Next up, the Cardinals. I think there's a lot of good players on this team, and there's not any giant gaping holes. I think you could add another pass catcher, but I just don't love the value here, and TJ Parker's just staring me in the face. I know they've added some big-time pieces to that defensive line room. Obviously, you have Walter Nolan. Calais Campbell's still there playing really well. And then on the edge, you added Josh Sweat. You have Baron Browning. You have some good guys in that room. But TJ Parker is a guy who I thought was a slam dunk top 5 pick before this season. Hasn't been quite as good this year, but the talent is still so in there. And I think getting him at number 11, Jonathan Gannon just may not be able to help himself because of that pure talent. And I think the Cardinals maybe don't take the biggest area of need, but certainly one of the best players available to them on the board at number 11 there. Next at number 12, the Chicago Bears. I think Ben Johnson values running backs more than most coaches, and DeAndre Swift has been one of the worst running backs in the NFL when it comes to down-to-down consistency, the ability to see the hole and get what's blocked up in front of him. I think Jeremiah Love, he hasn't had this completely ridiculous season so far. He's at 284 yards and 3 touchdowns so far through 3 games, so it's not like he's been bad at all. But I don't think they've used him quite as much as we maybe expected. I think he's a really, really talented player, though, and I think the upgrade of going from DeAndre Swift to a guy like Jeremiah Love would be huge, and I think Ben Johnson and this Bears offense want to be able to run the football, and Love would be a big-time upgrade in that running back room department for sure. Next, we have the Rams at number 13. This would be the Falcons selection when they traded up to go get James Pierce Jr. I think for the Rams, there's a couple different options you can go with, but I really like the idea of getting a corner. And a guy with Jermont McCoy, who was sensational last season, was destined to be a top 10 pick, was injured. He's not really been able to play at all this season. I don't know how much that's going to affect his stock, but he's a really, really good player. And I think the Rams could potentially be getting a little bit of a discount here because of the injury. Hopefully he's able to come back and look really good as he returns. But I think the Rams adding to that corner room where they are really quite thin, I think that would be a big-time upgrade for them. And then moving to the Cowboys, I also think that they would look to add to the corner room. You have DaRon Bland, you have Trayvon Diggs. Those guys, are on big-time contracts. They aren't the most consistent, and the other cornerback spots is certainly a big-time question mark. So I'm going to go with Avion Terrell out of Clemson. One of the guys who I do think has actually played really well on this defense, despite how much Clemson has struggled. I think that, he's a guy that is pretty scheme versatile. He's good in man and zone. I think he would be a big-time upgrade for this other corner spot on the Dallas defense, and a pretty solid selection at number 14 there. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this defense definitely hasn't been quite as good as we had hoped for, coming into the season, but I am going to go with the quarterback position because they just don't have a long-term answer here. Obviously, Rodgers is there right now. Maybe he plays one more season, but you kind of doubt it. So I think they need to get their long-term quarterback of the future in the room. And you could certainly argue for a lot of different guys here. John Mateer was really good, the potential Heisman favorite before he just had a hand injury that is going to keep him out for at least a couple of weeks. We'll see how that ultimately affects his draft stock. But, he's a big-time question mark. Dante Moore, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he goes back to college, but he's looked really good against some of the cupcakes that Oregon's played so far. They've dominated in very convincing fashion so far, so excited to see what they do against Penn State. If Dante Moore plays really well there, he could really start shooting up draft boards. Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, both guys who were, first-round picks coming into the season probably, but just haven't shown anything great. I think Aller has looked fine, but just kind of unremarkable, and Klubnik actually has really struggled. But I think it could be any of these 4 guys by the end of the season, but I'm going to go with John Mateer. His playmaking ability with his legs, he reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. The school, certainly I think helps you make that comparison, but when you watch him, how he plays, he's a little bit shorter. He's a playmaker when things break down. He's got kind of that cockiness, that kind of teeters on arrogance when he plays. He's just ultimately confident in himself, and I think John Mateer is a really fun quarterback prospect and a guy who, we'll see how the injury affects it, but he could be a first-round pick when this is all said and done. Next up, the Houston Texans. The offensive line really has been a problem. Just like we all kind of expected it to be coming into the season, it has not been good. So I think they're going to go with Isaiah World, the tackle out of Oregon. I think he's done a really good job. He was at Nevada before, transferred into Oregon this year, and I don't think has looked overwhelmed at all. I think he's played really effectively at that left tackle spot. I think he's got good athleticism, good ability, and I think that he could potentially end up being their Laramie Tunsil replacement. Maybe not quite as dominant because Tunsil is one of the game's best at left tackle, but I think he would be a reasonable, effort to kind of replace that production, which they have really sorely missed at that spot for the Texans as they now sit at 0-3. Similarly for the Seahawks, I think the offensive line can certainly stand to be improved, but we're going to go towards the interior here where I think they could really upgrade the center position. Connor Lew has been really good for Auburn. His PFF grades don't stand out, but I think he's really effective pass blocking. I think that he certainly has the potential to be a first-round interior offensive lineman, which is not always something you see. Pair him and Gray Zabel next to one another, and that all of a sudden can be an athletic and really competent interior offensive line, which the Seahawks have struggled massively with their offensive line over the past few years, and continuing to add investment to that area where your defense is going to be pretty good with Mike Macdonald at the helm, continuing to build around Sam Darnold, protect him, and allow him to use Jackson Smith and Jigba and the playmakers. I think that's a smart investment for the Seahawks. Next up, the Browns via the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was in the Mason Graham and Travis Hunter trade. For the Browns, you got them a quarterback early with Fernando Mendoza. Let's go get him some help around him. You could go to the offensive line, which I think they certainly need to upgrade that O-line because it is old and certainly not what it once was, but I just didn't love the value of the offensive line here, where I really like some of the wide receivers on the board. You've got Mekhi Lemon, Denzel Boston, and Carnell Tate, all guys who I think certainly have proven to be really nice playmakers this year. I just really like Denzel Boston, what he provides with his ability to go up, win contested catches, win in the red zone and in tight areas. And then he's a good separator as well. He's been really productive. He's just the kind of big body, athletic guy that I feel like the Browns really need. You have your separator with Jerry Jeudy. You have some other guys that can be some yards after catch type of opportunities. You need a big X receiver that can go up, win tough catches, be a safety blanket for your young quarterback. And I think Denzel Boston could certainly provide that. So that's where we have the Browns going at pick number 18. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings. And with the Vikings, I think the interior of this defensive line, they spent a lot of money on it with some veterans, but I think you can continue to get tougher, be able to defend the run a little bit better. And I think, this defense is just so good with its scheming and all of that stuff. But I think the interior players can continue to, you could get a little bit more out of them. And that's why I like going after Caleb Banks. He's a guy who is a good run defender. He's only played in one game this year, but he has good size at 6'6", 330 pounds. Certainly has some juice to get off the line, hit a pass rush move, then continuing to upgrade that group for a team that really does not have that many holes. And I think that certainly makes sense for the Vikings to select that and get tougher up front, stronger against the run, and be able to get some interior pressure as well. So going to have the Vikings taking Banks at number 19 there. Then we get into the 20s with the Denver Broncos. And I have them adding a weapon here. Went back and forth between a couple of guys. Somebody like Kenyon Sadiq to be that tight end. But they have Evan Ingram, Mekhi Lemon, and Carnell Tate, also both really good options. But ultimately, I went with Tate. I think he's shown some really nice things as the number 2 for Ohio State this year behind Jeremiah Smith. But he's certainly still making the most of his opportunities, been good in contested catch situations, an 83.3% contested catch win rate at the moment. He's just been really effective in the targets he has gotten, and I think an underrated player just because he plays on the same team as Jeremiah Smith. So I think the Broncos would love to get another playmaker, and Carnell Tate could be a really nice addition at number 20 there. At number 21, the Indianapolis Colts. I think they want to add to the defense. The offense has been pretty effective this year. The offensive line looks pretty good. You've got a nice variety of playmakers. Let's add to the defense. And, with Lou Anarumo's system, he likes big physical guys up front. And I think Keldrick Falk could certainly be that. He's a really good run defender. He's very strong. You can move him around. He's very versatile. Anarumo wants those big body guys. Falk is certainly that. 6'6", 285. He's a big physical run defender, has good athleticism. He is still kind of putting together a pass rush plan, but, I think Anarumo certainly has liked those prototypes where they're big athletic guys and he tries to develop them. So I think Falk makes sense for a Colts team who, you have some guys there, Kwity Paye, Latu, but you're still missing a star edge rusher, and you hope that Falk can potentially be that guy with some of his great traits. Picking him at number 21 there. Similarly, at number 22, we're going to go with another edge rusher, and that's Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M. He's a little bit less of a run defender, but he screams off the edge. Had 3 sacks in 3 plays. Forget what game it was, but he was just dominant. Has looked really good, screaming off the edge, providing pressure around that outside shoulder. He's definitely a little bit of a lighter player, 6'2", 248. He's not that big run-stuffing type of guy, but he's that true scream-off-the-edge pass rusher. You get him and Yaya Diaby. I think that's a pretty nice pass rushing duo and a guy that allows you to get after the quarterback a little bit better, which is something I certainly think the Buccaneers need. Gonna keep going to the edge rush well here for the Washington Commanders and go with LT Overton out of Alabama. He kind of conversely to what we just said about Cassius Howell. I think Overton is a really strong run defender. He's got great size. He really holds up against the point of attack well. You can kick him inside from time to time at 6'5", 278 pounds. He's just 20 years old at the moment. He has a really good pass rush win rate as well. He doesn't always get a ton of sacks, but he's a guy who's still developing in the pass rush department, but gives you a very high floors, high effort, run defending type edge with potential to be more of a pass rusher once he can continue to develop a bit further. Number 24 for the San Francisco 49ers now on the clock. I think interior defensive line is a big time need for them. You have Alfred Collins and CJ West, both of which you drafted last year, but outside of that, there is not much in this room at all. I really like Christian Miller for what he is. He's an interior guy who can provide some really good run defense snaps, but is also a guy with enough athleticism and an occasional nice little swim move or ability to shed a block and get some pass rush as well. 11.9 pass rush win rate from the interior is very, very solid for him, and he's a good run defender, has the athleticism and the traits, seems like he has a very good attitude and character as well. He's a guy that I do certainly see being a first-round pick based on him playing really effectively in the SEC and having a lot of the traits that you look for. So for the 49ers, to me, that just makes a ton of sense for them to pick him up there. Number 25 for the Rams, I think quarterback of the future absolutely has to be on the table. I said that Dante Moore is a guy who I would expect to go back to college, but that may or may not happen. And based on what he's done so far, he's been fantastic. You look at his 89.3 overall grade. He's been really good. 11 touchdowns, 1 interception, has a very high completion percentage. He has a good ability to, use his arm and also run with the football as well. He's got pretty solid athleticism. I really do think that Dante Moore has shown a lot this season in his redshirt sophomore season. He is draft eligible though, 6'3", 206 pounds. Could certainly see him continue to climb up draft boards and get into the first round or maybe even the top 10. And if he continues to play as well as he has against better competition, he could be in the conversation for the first quarterback taken off the board, which could be the number 1 overall pick. So I think the Rams getting him at number 25 is partially a testament to how well he's played this year, but still a lot of uncertainty as he's a very young player and a guy who has really only played at that elite level for a few games now. But the question is, can he continue it? Next up for the Chargers, I really wanted to give them an edge rusher. There's not a lot of guys here for guys I would think of for a traditional Jim Harbaugh defense, tough run defending guy, but I do think they really, really need some juice on that, pass rush, essentially. And David Bailey certainly gives you some juice when it comes to pass rushing. He has been sensational his last 2 seasons at Stanford and now at Texas Tech. He, has 4 sacks already this season, is getting tons of pressures. He's a great pass rusher. I don't think he's an abysmal run defender either. And, having that ability to just scream off the edge, win from a variety of different ways, inside, outside, every once in a while, some kind of power move. I think David Bailey could certainly get himself into this first round conversation. And he's certainly a guy with just a ton of production to back it up at this point. Number 27 for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think Travis Kelce certainly is not the player he once was, and I really think Kenyon Sadiq has been an excellent player for this Oregon offense. 3 touchdowns on the season, 155 yards. He's just been getting open very consistently, has been a really nice weapon for them, and I could certainly see the Chiefs kind of looking at Kenyon Sadiq, seeing if they can eventually replace the production with Kelce that they, have relied on so heavily in the Mahomes era. Getting a guy like Kenyon Sadiq who can be a really nice kind of tight end 2 to start and then eventually take over that role, I think that could be a really, really nice pick for the Chiefs and a good value when it comes to the player's level of talent. Next up, the Lions on the board next, and I think they need to add to the corner room. There's a couple of options you could go with here. A.J. Harris, Dalen Everett. There's a couple of other guys deep down the board. Keith Abney, I think, is really underrated. I could see him going in the first round, maybe not quite there yet, but he's been a really nice player. Somebody who I've been really impressed with is Colton Hood. He's been fantastic this season. Obviously, Jermon McCoy was the guy we were looking at in the Tennessee corner room as maybe that guy that could be a first-round pick, but Colton Hood has been fantastic as well, and I think the Lions, certainly could be interested. 6 foot, 195 pounds. He's a guy that can play with some physicality. I really like what he does, and I think the Lions need to upgrade that room, and so that could certainly be a nice fit for a guy that is certainly moving up draft boards pretty rapidly, I think. And number 29 for the Cowboys, I think they need to add another weapon. Obviously have CeeDee Lamb, but there's still, you have George Pickens, but is he going to be there next season? I would be a little bit surprised if he is because of the amount of money that they would be paying the 2 wide receivers and Dak. And, Obviously, the situation with Micah Parsons is, fresh on the mind when it comes to the Cowboys. So I don't know if they're going to be paying George Pickens. So this is kind of under the assumption that they don't. And that's going to select Mekhi Lemon out of USC. He's been great this season. He's really good, at just creating separation. And that's his biggest calling card. He is a guy that operates predominantly out of the slot because he's not huge, 5'11", 195, but he's a guy that just creates so much separation, being able to utilize his Dak's ability to read the field, throw with anticipation and timing. I think Lemon fits perfectly into that mold and would be a really nice player for them to add. Next at 30 for the Baltimore Ravens, they really struggled at that right guard spot with Faalele. And you're kind of drafting a similar player here, but I think a guy that in Caden Proctor really struggled out at tackle for Alabama so far this season. He's a guy that I don't know if he's going to end up, going high in the draft because he has really struggled at tackle, but the physical traits are so good in theory. 6'7", 366 pounds, but you could play him at right guard. He's very similarly sized to Faalele, but he's younger. I think he's a guy that has really good mass, and he is just so hard to get through. There are some technical problems on this, player profile, but I think with the Ravens, they have shown an ability to really like Alabama and SEC type players, big school players, guys that can come in and do one thing really effectively. And for Proctor, that is, his ability to stop the bull rush and be able to use his size effectively. Ultimately they may opt for a different body type because Faalele has really struggled kind of within that same mold, but I think you need to add to the interior of the offensive line, and Proctor would be a very interesting way to do that. Next up for the Eagles at number 31, I think that they did lose a little bit of talent at the edge rush spot, losing Josh Sweat, some of the other guys they've lost over the years. So we're going to replenish that as we know how he loves to do, and that's with R. Mason Thomas, who has been a freak coming off the edge. Against Auburn, he had some really good snaps. He's not a great run defender. He's more of that designated pass rush type, but the Eagles have shown that they really can like players in that mold, and I think R. Mason Thomas has some real juice coming off the edge as an edge rusher there. And then for the Buffalo Bills at number 32, the cornerback room is pretty surprisingly bare, and so I think they really need to add to that. They've kind of been picked over at this point, but I'm going to go with A.J. Harris. He's a guy that, I think has some really good reps, has some not so good reps, but he just needs to continue to be a little bit more consistent. The talent is all in there, and he could certainly be a great player, but just needs to continue to build some consistency. This is ultimately kind of a really early look into the draft. Don't pay too much attention to where we ended up putting these guys. It's kind of just an introduction to some of the players playing really well, the players that may be dropping down the board a little bit further as well. So that is ultimately going to do it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this kind of content, please hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, hit the like button as well. Both of those just free and easy ways to support the channel, let YouTube know you liked it, and push it out to other NFL and NFL draft fans just like you. Going to be coming to you with a lot more NFL draft content coming up, so you won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.